that, I am honored to turn it over to Senator Megan Hunt.
Thank you so much, Scout. I'm Senator Megan Hunt, and I represent District 8 in Nebraska, which is pretty much a lot of Midtown Omaha. But when it comes to abortion care and reproductive justice, I feel like I represent everybody in Nebraska because I'm such a fighter and such an advocate to make sure that people get the care they need. We've had lots of legislation introduced in the legislature to address reproductive health in a proactive way. We don't always want to be on the defense. We want to be introducing things that are proactive in helping people get the care that they need. Some of those bills include a repeal on the telemedicine for abortion ban. This bill would allow for medication abortion to be administered via telehealth. This prohibition doesn't exist for any other medical procedure in Nebraska. And this policy that says you can't get a medication abortion via telehealth, it really harms low-income women and rural women in particular. So this is something for early term pregnancies, and it's taken orally. It's totally safe. It's done all over the country and all over the world. And that's something we'll continue to work on in Nebraska. Another one that comes to mind is emergency contraception for assault survivors. This bill would require emergency rooms and hospitals to provide information about emergency contraception and administer it if the patient wants it. Currently, we know that not all hospitals in Nebraska are doing this. So when somebody comes to the hospital and they report an assault, some hospitals, usually for religious motivated reasons, they don't tell the patient about emergency contraception, which could, stop an unwanted pregnancy. And this is unfair to traumatized assault survivors to not know if the emergency room they end up in is going to provide them with the standard of care and treatment. This is a bill that I've introduced several times. We thought that there was support for it in committee, but people create so much confusion and spread so much misinformation about how care works that, I feel like a lot of the work we have to do is just battling that misinformation and ignorance in the body of the people who represent us and pass these laws. So I will continue to work on legislation like this. I will continue to be a fighter against bad legislation. I have to tell you all, I feel like a tiger in a cage. Oh, my dog's barking. She's a tiger in a cage. Okay, sorry to interrupt the press conference, but these are the realities of doing this from home. This is cricket. But basically, I'm ready to go because as long as people have been getting pregnant, people have been trying not to be pregnant. And this is not new. And with this, this law in Texas, we're truly entering an era in our country that takes us back to the 60s and 70s and before, when people will be forced into difficult decisions and accessing abortion will have to come through word of mouth. And that's a really scary moment in our nation's history. And that could really have lasting impacts on generations of Nebraskans to come. We talk about wanting to build our economy in Nebraska. We talk about wanting to attract and retain talent. Well, I can tell you, young professionals don't want to live in a state where they can't get reproductive health care. And there is a lot of political pressure being put on policymakers. And I have to tell you, it's coming from a very vocal minority. There are so many Republicans in our state who are honestly traditional Midwestern Republicans. They don't hate women. They don't hate people of color. They just want lower taxes and they want the government out of people's lives. And abortion bans are the least important thing to these people. But this really vocal minority is pushing their narrow agenda and their ideologies, and they show up to every hearing. They sign letters, they contact their representatives, and they're the ones standing outside of our offices during session. So even though they don't represent a majority of Nebraska's values, they have assembled so much power because they're the only ones that politicians see. So that's why it's really important that Nebraskans mobilize and demand policies that align with our values and expand access to affordable, high-quality reproductive health care. And that includes abortion care. reproductive healthcare champions in the legislature, like me, like Senator Pansing Brooks, like Senator Blood, Senator Wishart. In recent years, we've introduced proactive legislation to expand Nebraskans' access to healthcare. And in 2022, we will continue that work. I will be working with advocates to make sure that we introduce legislation that's proactive, that not only addresses reproductive justice, but racial justice, class issues, workers' rights, because we know that all of these issues are interconnected. And in the end, they all help Nebraskans receive better healthcare and reproductive healthcare. I have to say that I fully expect anti-abortion politicians in Nebraska to continue to push this agenda in response to the Texas law. And actually, side note, this is also why redistricting really matters right now, because we have to make sure that we keep the numbers of allies in the legislature to fight back against these bills, and also make sure that we keep the rules in place in our legislature so that we can filibuster and we can block these bills. There are so many procedural ways, using procedure, using the rules, that we can block these bills, and I will be there in the fight every step of the way. We know that most people support the right to safe legal abortion. A vocal minority is leading the charge against abortion, against healthcare, against comprehensive sex education. And that's why those of us who support reproductive freedom, who want government out of our lives, we have to speak up before it's too late and encourage our friends and our neighbors and our families to do the same. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Claire.